So Keir Starmer just told a room full of European leaders that Britain isn't the country of the Brexit years anymore, got a massive round of applause, and essentially betrayed every single promise the Leave campaign ever made in 9 perfect words. We're talking about a prime minister standing in Munich nearly 2 years into office, declaring to European allies that the UK has fundamentally changed its position on the very issue that defined British politics for a decade.
Moments ago, live on air, Sir Keir Starmer faced a moment that has left the nation talking. In a tense exchange with Andrew Neil, everything seemed to go wrong, and the footage is now spreading across social media faster than ever. What exactly happened in that shocking minute? Let's break it down. Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has been in the spotlight for months, navigating a political landscape full of challenges and public scrutiny. Known for his measured style and legal background, Starmer is often seen as calm, collected, and careful in his words. However, even the most experienced politicians can stumble under the right circumstances. That moment came earlier today during an interview with Andrew Neil, one of the UK's most direct and incisive political journalists. Neil is famous for his sharp questions and relentless style, pushing politicians to give clear, unscripted answers. For viewers, his interviews are never easy, and today was no exception. The interview was set to cover a range of pressing issues, including economic policy, party leadership, and responses to recent government decisions. The cameras were rolling and millions were watching, both live and on social media. Starmer entered the studio with his usual composed demeanour, but it quickly became clear that Neil's questions would put him on the spot. From the very beginning, the atmosphere was tense. Neil has a way of asking questions that seem simple but are loaded with implications, designed to reveal hesitation or inconsistency. The initial exchange started normally, with questions about party policy and Starmer's vision for the future. But almost immediately, Neil moved to a topic that caught Starmer off guard. The journalist asked about a recent statement made by Starmer regarding government handling of a critical national issue. The question was pointed, requiring an answer that was not only accurate but also politically sensitive. Starmer attempted to respond with his usual careful phrasing, but his words quickly became muddled, and his tone suggested uncertainty. What made this moment particularly dramatic was the contrast between Starmer's usual control and the way he appeared to lose it under the questioning. In previous interviews, he has demonstrated the ability to navigate tricky questions smoothly, often turning them to highlight his party's strengths or achievements. Today, however, Neil's relentless approach seemed to unbalance him. Viewers immediately noticed the subtle signs: a pause too long before answering, a shift in eye contact, and a slightly defensive posture. These are small gestures, but in the world of live political interviews, they can be interpreted as uncertainty or discomfort. Neil pressed further, asking Starmer to clarify a previous comment that had already attracted media attention and public debate. This is a common tactic in political journalism. Revisiting statements and pushing for clarification exposes contradictions or weaknesses in a politician's narrative. Starmer's response was hesitant, and in the split seconds of hesitation, the tension in the studio grew. The combination of a high-stakes topic, the pressure of live cameras, and Neil's sharp questioning created a scenario that was ripe for what would become a viral moment. At the same time, the backdrop of the interview played a role. The studio cameras captured every micro-expression, and social media users were ready to dissect every frame in real time. People watching online noticed immediately that something was off. Comments began to flood in about Starmer's unusual body language, his choice of words, and the way Neil leaned in slightly, maintaining an unwavering gaze. In interviews like this, small details matter more than the words themselves. The body language, tone, and timing all contribute to the perception of confidence or the lack of it. This context sets the stage for what would become a widely shared moment of political embarrassment. The first section is crucial because it establishes who the key players are, the environment in which the incident occurred, and why it mattered. Understanding Starmer's usual style and Neil's interviewing approach helps the audience grasp why this particular exchange stood out so dramatically. While Starmer has faced tough questions before, the combination of live scrutiny, a sensitive topic, and Neil's precise questioning created a scenario that even the most experienced politician would find challenging. From this setup, it becomes clear that the upcoming moment is not just another political interview. It's a live demonstration of how quickly the thing can unravel when preparation meets pressure. The audience is primed to understand the stakes, the personalities involved, and the social context in which this humiliation occurred. With millions of eyes watching and social media ready to amplify every second, what happened next would not remain private or unnoticed. The moment that has now gone viral began when Andrew Neil asked Sir Keir Starmer a question that required a direct and unambiguous answer. Neil's style is famously unrelenting. He doesn't allow politicians to dodge or pivot. On live television, this can be intimidating, even for seasoned leaders. Starmer, who usually handles tricky questions with careful phrasing, appeared momentarily caught off guard. The camera captured him pausing longer than usual, his eyes flicking to the side as he tried to find the words. That pause, brief as it was enough for viewers to sense hesitation, sparking immediate reactions online. Neil pressed on, reiterating the question, but framing it in a way that highlighted potential contradictions in Starmer's earlier statements. For viewers, it looked like Starmer was trying to mentally navigate a maze. One wrong word could be interpreted as inconsistency, weakness, or even dishonesty. He began his response cautiously, attempting to explain his position while avoiding conflict. However, in doing so, his sentences became tangled and his usual clarity disappeared. Instead of a smooth, confident answer, the response sounded fragmented and uncertain. At one point, Neil paused for effect, letting the silence hang in the air. This is a technique he often uses, creating subtle pressure on the person being interviewed. For a politician, even a second of hesitation can feel much longer when the world is watching. Starmer tried to regain control, adjusting his posture, clearing his throat and reformulating his sentences, yet every attempt seemed to slip further from his usual command of the conversation. The footage shows small but telling details, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a hand gesture that seemed to signal frustration, and a repeated phrase that didn't quite answer the question. These small signs, when amplified by millions of viewers online, become a narrative of uncertainty. The pivotal moment came when Starmer attempted to explain a policy point related to the party's stance on a recent government decision. Instead of strengthening his argument, his wording inadvertently contradicted previous statements. Neil immediately seized on this, asking for clarification in a calm but pointed tone. The exchange was brief, but the impact was immediate. Social media users began commenting on how Starmer stumbled live and questioning whether he had prepared for the interview at all. Clips of the exchange were shared across platforms, each one emphasising the pauses, the hesitations, and the brief look of discomfort on Starmer's face. Neil's follow-up questions only added to the pressure. Each time Starmer tried to clarify, Neil redirected the conversation toward points that required Starmer to admit limits or past errors. For a politician, this is a delicate balance: acknowledge a mistake and risk criticism, or dodge the question and appear evasive. Starmer's responses attempted to thread this needle, but the live format left little room for nuance. The tension was palpable, and for viewers, it became clear that Starmer was struggling to maintain his usual composure. By the end of the segment, the humiliation narrative had taken hold, not because of a major error, but because of the combination of live pressure, repeated questioning, and the high stakes of national attention. In the world of modern media, where clips are replayed, paused, and analysed frame by frame, even minor moments can become defining. For Starmer, this minute-long exchange with Andrew Neil has become one of those moments, scrutinised, replayed, and talked about as though it were a defining misstep, despite the actual content of what he said being relatively minor in political terms. Almost immediately after the interview aired, social media erupted. Clips of Sir Keir Starmer's hesitation and awkward phrasing spread across platforms like wildfire. On Twitter, viewers began posting short snippets of the exchange, often with captions highlighting Starmer's pauses, nervous gestures, or repeated phrases. Hashtags related to the interview started trending, and within minutes, millions were engaging with the footage. Some commentators framed it as a major gaffe, calling it a humiliation on live television, while others focused on the pressure of being questioned by Andrew Neil, acknowledging how even experienced politicians can struggle in this kind of intense environment. The speed and intensity of reactions demonstrated how quickly public perception can form in the digital age. Memes began circulating almost immediately, exaggerating Starmer's hesitations for comedic effect. In forums, chat groups, and YouTube comments, people debated whether the interview revealed a deeper weakness in his leadership style or if it was just a minor slip blown out of proportion by social media amplification. Even mainstream news outlets picked up on the story, analysing his responses and replaying key moments for viewers who hadn't seen the live broadcast. Interestingly, the reactions that were divided, supporters of Starmer pointed out that interviews like this are deliberately difficult and designed to corner politicians. They argued that Neil's persistent questioning was meant to provoke exactly this kind of reaction, and that Starmer's answers, though hesitant, were technically accurate and measured. Critics, on the other hand, focused on the optics, the long pauses, repeated phrases, and moments of apparent uncertainty. For them, it reinforced a narrative that Starmer struggles under pressure and lacks the charisma needed for a high-profile leadership role. The incident also highlighted the role of short-form video platforms in shaping public opinion. Clips under 30 seconds, often stripped of context, went viral quickly, emphasising the most dramatic aspects of the exchange. Viewers who only saw these snippets may have interpreted the moment as far more damaging than the full interview would suggest. Analysts later pointed out that this is a growing challenge for politicians in the social media era. One small pause or minor misstep can be replayed, commented on, and turned into a trending story within minutes, regardless of its actual significance. Even outside social media, the moment generated discussion among political commentators and experts. Pundits on news channels debated whether this incident could affect Starmer's public approval ratings, his party's image, or upcoming political strategy. Some framed it as a cautionary tale about the importance of live interview skills and media training, while others treated it as evidence of broader concerns about leadership confidence. In political terms, even small moments like this can have ripple effects, shaping how the public perceives competence, decisiveness, and credibility. The speed and intensity of the online reaction also showed how modern political communication works. Every gesture, word, and pause is scrutinised. Millions of viewers replayed the clip, discussed it with friends, and posted opinions online, effectively creating a global audience that judged the moment almost in real time. The combination of live television, social media amplification, and a high-profile political figure meant that Starmer's gaffe became more than just a short-lived blip. It became a talking point across media platforms and political conversations alike. In short, what happened in that brief minute was magnified far beyond the studio. The incident became a cultural moment showing the power of live television and social media in shaping public perception. Even though the actual misstep was minor, the combination of Neil's sharp questioning, Starmer's hesitation, and instant online commentary created a perfect storm, turning a small moment into a headline-grabbing event. Millions of viewers now associate that one exchange with Starmer, illustrating how quickly reputation can be affected in the modern media environment. In the end, what makes this moment so noteworthy is not just what Sir Keir Starmer said or failed to say, but how it was perceived by millions watching live and online. The combination of Andrew Neil's sharp questioning, Starmer's visible hesitation, and the instant amplification of social media created a situation that has now become one of the most talked about political moments of the week. Even minor gaffes can take on a life of their own in today's media landscape, and this incident is a textbook example. For politicians, moments like these are a reminder that public perception can change in an instant. Starmer, known for his careful and calculated approach, found himself in a situation where every second mattered, every pause was analysed, and every gesture was scrutinised. In live interviews, there's no room for retakes. That pressure, combined with the relentless focus of modern media, can make even small missteps seem much larger. This is why so many commentators, both critics and supporters, have been weighing in. It's less about the content of the answers and more about how the leader handled the pressure in real time. The incident also highlights the growing influence of social media in shaping political narratives. In previous decades, a politician's slip-up might have been reported the next day in newspapers or evening news shows. Today, clips can go viral within minutes, reaching a global audience, sparking debates, memes, and analysis instantly. In this context, a single pause or an awkward phrase can dominate headlines, create talking points, and influence public perception in ways that were impossible just a few years ago. For Starmer, this exchange with Neil became an example of how high-stakes media appearances are increasingly unpredictable and potentially consequential. Yet it's also important to note that 1 minute does not define a career. Starmer has weathered criticism and media scrutiny before, and politicians often recover from brief missteps if they respond strategically afterward. However, the speed and intensity of today's reaction show that in modern politics, every public moment counts. Leaders are constantly being judged, not just on policies or statements, but on their confidence, composure, and ability to communicate under pressure. This is why analysts are now asking, will this moment influence voter confidence? Will it shape future interviews, or Starmer's public appearances? Only time will tell. But the immediate impact is undeniable. For viewers, the takeaway is clear. Politics in the media age is as much about perception as it is about policy. A single live exchange, amplified across platforms, can become a defining moment in the public conversation. The footage of Starmer during this interview will be analysed, shared and discussed for days, and it serves as a reminder that even seasoned leaders can be caught off guard as in the spotlight. For Andrew Neil, it's another example of his skill in holding politicians accountable, asking tough questions and creating moments that capture public attention. As the dust settles, one thing remains certain. This is a moment that will be remembered, replayed and referenced whenever Starmer faces tough questioning in the future. It's a snapshot of modern politics, fast-moving, scrutinised in real time, and shaped by a combination of live television and instant digital reaction. For viewers, it's also a lesson in how quickly appearances can matter and how 1 minute can sometimes feel like an eternity in the public eye.